Hello and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Daryl Grove and I'm joined by a man who's once, twice, three times a hero. It's Taylor Rockwell. Hello.
Hey, buddy. How you doing?
I'm good. I said I'm joined by you. We're actually telecommunicating today. We're phoning it in.
I mean, I like to think that we're still together if I'm verbally connected to you. That's all that matters.
So we watched Chile v Portugal 0-0, then 3-0 on penalty kicks. We've watched it separately, so we may have different ideas about the game. How about that?
I'm not sure we will, but let's see.
So the big talking point is going to be Claudio Bravo's hat trick of penalty kick saves in the shootout. Glove trick. I'm going to call it a glove trick. Before we get into sort of how he did that, which I suspect is how I'm going to title this show. Why were there no goals in the preceding 120 minutes of Confederations Cup semi-final quote-unquote action?
I mean, it certainly wasn't for a lack of opportunities. There were definitely chances for both teams on either end. Neither team was just able to finish them effectively. So that's a big part of it, I would say, is that neither team took the chances when they had them.
A lot of block shots. I saw a lot of block shots. And I saw a lot of Andre Gomes puts it over the bar.
Yeah, I was going to say. I think somebody already wondered when we were going to mess up the Silvas. Like we already messed it up with the Andres, but there we are. Yeah, but I mean, you even had in the first 10 minutes or so, you had one really good chance at either end. And so it really could have gone either way in those first couple minutes. I think it did calm down after that. Obviously, then you have Chile hitting the bar and the post in the final minute. I mean, so there were chances, but I think they were few and far between. And I think that's because both teams, after those initial couple of minutes, calmed down a lot and really executed the game plan they were both trying to execute. And that led to 0-0 in penalties.
Yeah, speaking of, the thing I saw from Portugal was a commitment to not overcommit. Yep. And then they made sure that they sort of kept too central all the time, right? I think it was Alves and William Carvalho made sure they stayed in the centre all the time. The wide guys didn't push on too much. So anytime Chile were trying to play it out of the back, and they wouldn't go long ball, they'd try and pass it out of the back. There wasn't really an obvious route through, was there? Because Portugal, they didn't sit deep, but they sat behind the halfway line and waited for the most part, especially their midfielders. Maybe Ronaldo and Andre Silva would do a little bit of pressing, but nothing, not enough to make Chile cough the ball up, but not enough space to let them go and pass it in behind.
No, and I think that's the key thing, the passing in behind, is that, yes, Adrian Silva and William Carvalho really did stay central. What I saw, though, was that you'd see Carvalho kind of routinely dropping a little.
Andre Gomes, you've done it as well.
No, I saw Adrian Silva playing in the middle at first. So that's the other thing that was interesting to me, is that Andre Gomes moved around. Yeah. That he started out left, then he went to the right side, then he ended up top before being subbed off. He played sometimes in the middle. But I think that's what I'm getting at, is that I think you kept having those wide players tuck inside, and it was almost a three-man midfield, like trying to block off Chile playing through the middle. And so sometimes you'd see Arturo Vidal come in behind and try to get into some space, but you would routinely have people in front of him not allowing that pass to come through.
And the guy I want to say the guy I was most impressed with, if you remove Arturo Vidal, who's kind of always impressive in his all-action kind of way, was Marcelo Diaz for Chile. Because he was the only guy that seemed to find any way of passing through that midfield. He would essentially split that crowded midfield and at least find Arturo Vidal or Alexis Sanchez, but then they still had loads of work to do once they got the ball because they had the whole defence to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, and so I think you just kept having situations when they would regain the ball, and they didn't want to be, as you said, overly aggressive, both teams. And so then you would sort of either have the ball hoofed long and hope that something could happen, or you'd have some kind of cagey possession, but it wouldn't really go anywhere. Yeah. To the extent that the commentators, at least in my feed, were talking about how it seems like they're both actively trying to win the battle of possession, because that seems to be the thing that was most hotly contested, as opposed to scoring opportunities.
Like they thought maybe it was first tiebreaker.
I mean, it could be. You never know.
One moment we should talk about before we move on to the penalty shootout is a possible penalty that maybe Chile should have had. Silva, number 5, he came off the bench for Chile, I think was tripped by Joseph Font.
I agree. Yeah, and again, I don't know what your comment. I don't know the difference between the streaming commentators and the Fox Sports 1 commentators. I'm assuming this was on Fox Sports 1.
It was. It was John Strong and Stu Holden, the dream team.
So I did not have them. I had a British commentator who insisted that it was going to be a yellow for diving. That was he was like, oh, and we've got a yellow coming for a dive here. And then after that, he was like, oh, I think it could have been, and kind of didn't really defend it either way. But yeah, in my mind, and maybe that colored some of the perspective, but it absolutely looked like Silva's foot got stepped on and he rightfully went down. I think that very much could have been a penalty.
Yeah, my first reaction was that maybe Silva left his foot behind, so he was looking to get hooked. But even that, he didn't at all. It was just his foot got caught behind by Fonte, and that's why his foot was still there. So yeah, I think it was basically a bad call by the ref. And then I think that's the thing where, because it wasn't called a penalty, you don't get VAR for it, right? Unless those guys were up in the booth and they saw something and they would have communicated it down to the referee. But none of that happened. So this was a VAR fail.
Unless it was one of those situations where it's supposed to be clear, and maybe you can make the argument that, like, if you watched it 5 times, 3 times you might say penalty, 2 times you might think, like, oh, incidental contact, because you don't have like reasonable, or like, what is it? You still have reasonable doubt if it is or it isn't, so it then doesn't justify automatic replay unless the referee asks for it.
So it's like 12 angry men. You've got to have unanimous decision.
Yep, and you don't have I forget who it is who's in there talking everybody into saying not guilty.
Oh, I can't remember.
He's famous. I know that much, and it's going to annoy me till I remember it.
Is it Atticus Finch, or was he the lawyer?
He's the lawyer, but that's from To Kill a Mockingbird.
Oh wow, I'm all over the place. I apologize.
You're definitely all over the place.
I apologize. Stick to soccer, Daryl. Stick to soccer.
Peter Fonda, I believe it is. He says without looking it up. Hopefully he's right. If not, I'm sure we'll get it on Twitter. But I wanted to ask, what did John Strong and Stu Holden say about that incident?
Honestly, I can't remember.
Okay.
I think they were initially confused and not sure, and then I think there was no strong decision either way, basically.
I got you. But that's why I texted you. Like, there was contact there, right? Because my commentator was so adamant that there wasn't, that it was a dive, that I was like, am I taking crazy pills here? So that's why I had you to bounce my ideas off of. Thanks for that, Daryl.
Well, speaking of being adamant, a thing that did happen is in the Fox Sports studio, I think between full-time and extra time, they started talking about penalty kicks, or maybe between the end of extra time and penalty kicks. And Ian Wright, you know Ian Wright, right? Former Arsenal striker, was adamant that this was Portugal's to win on penalty kicks because Rui Patricio is taller than Claudio Bravo. And he just, basically Ian Wright didn't rate Bravo because I think, and I love Ian Wright, he's like a good cheeky chappy, like a real character of English football. I think Ian Wright is only familiar with the English Premier League version of Claudio Bravo, where he's a bit of a laughingstock, and not the international soccer knockout round version of Claudio Bravo, where he is unbeatable, at least for the last 3 summers.
What was it like when they cut back to studio?
He kind of owned it.
Okay. I mean, you kind of have to there, right? Because, it's Claudio Bravo making, I would say, 2 very good saves and then 1 decent save off of a very poorly taken penalty.
3 saves, though, is the key, right? My commentary, I'm pretty confident it was John Strong. After the first one, he kept saying, and another save from Claudio Bravo.
I think the tweet that's been doing the rounds, the stat that's been doing the rounds, is he had as many penalty saves in this game as he had saves in 2017 for Manchester City.
No!
So that tells you something.
That's the second half of the season?
Yep.
Wow.
Supposedly. Who knows? Who knows if these things are true? You can never really trust the internet.
I mean, to be fair, he didn't get to come up against Quaresma, Matinho, and Nani in the Premier League. Maybe that was the difference.
Well, again, I don't think those first 2 penalties were poorly taken. I thought they were. I mean, you could maybe argue they should be a little bit wider, maybe a little bit lower. He did put them in a spot where they could be saved, but it's still full stretch saves from Bravo. Then the third one from Nani, like, that looked all the world like he just did not want to be there. He did not want to be the one taking the decisive penalty, and I think it showed in just that it was an instep. It wasn't hit with much power. He kind of telegraphed where it was going, and there you go. Chile advance.
Well, I'd like to talk about sort of how Bravo pulled this off and what he did, because I've watched the tape a few times, and I'm sure you have as well. But if we're going to just criticise the penalty takers for a second, my issue with Nani is that he essentially did a very similar thing to Matinho, right? Which is the slow run-up with a bit of a stutter step in there. Yep. And he'd just seen that not work. So why would you go up and try that same move again?
I mean, I would say the only thing would be that he put it to the other side of the goal, and maybe there was some thinking there that, like, oh, Portugal are always going to go to their left, the goalkeeper's right. So maybe he thought he was changing it. But again, as we talked about yesterday, once you start getting into the head games situation where you're trying to outthink the goalkeeper as you're running out to take the penalty, not saying he was, but it certainly seemed like he wasn't confident in his decision as he started the run-up. It's never going to end too well for the taker,
And do you agree with the idea that maybe Ronaldo should have put himself higher up the order?
Yep, I certainly do.
I think it's pretty... I mean, once you lose 3-0 and you don't even get to take one, it's pretty cut and dried that you should have been higher up the order.
Yeah, and I think we've seen it before that like the best penalty kick taker on your team should be your first penalty kick taker. Like you want it, and maybe Ronaldo isn't the best taker. That's potentially why. But you do wonder if maybe there was that element of like he wants to be the fifth, the decisive taker who could put the game out of reach. I don't know. I know that when he took one from Man United in the Champions League final, he missed it. So maybe that was it. Is that he wanted to like be as far away from the potential of ruining everything as he could be.
I think so. A lot of those interpretations, they make it all about Cristiano Ronaldo's ego, which I think is maybe unfair to the man himself. I think it may be that someone has decided, not like he wants to be the hero, but it's more like he's a dependable guy to have at number 5, and that's the plan. You know what I'm saying? There is a more self-sacrificing version of going number 5 than just you want to be the one that gets to all the celebration.
First of all, Daryl Grove sacrificing virgins on the Total Soccer Show. Not sure how I feel about that. So, I mean, yes.
I misspoke.
Except that it's Cristiano Ronaldo. Like, he's going to go where he wants to go. If he says, I'm going first, he's going first. If he says, I'm going fifth, I'm going fifth.
Yeah.
Or he's going fifth. So, I mean, I definitely think that he had a say in the order, or at least his order in the 5. And I think that if he is a reliable penalty kick taker, you want him going first or second or maybe third because you want to make sure that you kind of keep pace or go ahead and don't fall behind.
Fair enough. Okay, so shall we talk about the man of the moment, Claudio Bravo, with his three consecutive penalty kick saves?
I mean, yeah, I think we have to. So I'm curious to see what you thought on the first two, because I couldn't really pick out much other than that he does kind of like maybe jumps a little bit to the left before diving to the right, but I didn't see anything too obvious.
Okay, so yeah, here's my theory. That's it. On the first one, the Quaresma penalty kick, Bravo waits. Quaresma doesn't do like the stutter step or the slow run up, but he does do a bit of moving around beforehand. And then as Quaresma is close to sort of getting ready to strike, Claudio Bravo takes a little jump to the left and I think opens up that gap, because when you jump to the left, you open up a gap on your right. And I think he tempts Quaresma into that side. But that was all Bravo's plan, right? Is to tempt him into that side and then dive that way. I mean, that's why you do that, right? You fake jump in left, go there a little bit, open it up, then dive to the right and save it. I think that's what he did.
I think so too.
For number 2 and 3 with Matinho and Nani, who I think they took very similar penalty kicks where it's a slow run up with a bit of a stutter. And the idea there is, I think, I saw Justin Bryant, who's a goalkeeper. Do you know Justin Bryant? Goalkeeper, American guy who played sort of lower league in England, but is sort of very good at sort of communicating goalkeeping things.
I do not, but now I do.
So he talked about how when you're in goal, when you're taking a penalty and you run up slowly, the idea is that you're doing that to wait for the goalkeeper to make a decision when you're the taker. And then after the goalkeeper makes his decision, you go the other way and you sort of outthink the goalkeeper. And what you need to do as a goalkeeper in that situation is make the decision to stay still. And that's what Bravo does on Matinho's slow run up and Nani's slow run up. Bravo just he doesn't stand exactly still. He sort of just moves his left and right foot up and down like he's like jogging on the spot, sort of. But he doesn't go to the left or to the right. So he essentially forces Matinho and Nani to sort of have a plan B on the way up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Brian says that like essentially usually when the taker's plan is to make the goalkeeper go first and then go the other way, that means they haven't picked a side. They haven't got a plan B where they've said, if that doesn't happen, I'm going to go hard to the right. So you don't move and then you get it.
So then in that case, I think Claudio Bravo built upon his strategy each time. So the first time he cheats one way, then dives the other. The second one he remains motionless and then makes the move.
Yeah.
I still think maybe he leans one way really briefly just to maybe throw in a little bit of chaos. The final one with Nani. Now I could be wrong because I watched these right after the game. Then I went and walked the dogs. But I am fairly confident that as Nani is standing there, Bravo points to his right. Like he has his right hand up in the air, sort of gesturing like the other two went that way. You sure you want to go that way?
Yeah,
and then he dives to his left and saves it.
I saw that too. But again, that's Bravo getting in Nani's head rather than allowing Nani to sort of get in Bravo's head and then go the other way. So it's Bravo in mental control of the whole situation. Stu Holden also noted that Bravo did a lot of things like taking his time, getting his water bottle, strolling around, like icing them a little bit. I think all that works as well. And I've got one more technical thing that I saw, but I realize I've been talking a lot. So do you have anything else?
No, I have something else to say after we talk about Claudio Bravo. So go ahead, continue to gush.
So the other thing on all 3 penalty kicks, Bravo does this thing where before he dives, he hops forward. And he hops forward before the taker fully strikes the ball. So he's essentially cheating a tiny little bit but not enough that it's really enough for a referee to call it back, because they almost never do. But if you take a tiny hop forward as part of your dive, then you close the angle, right? Because instead of being 12 yards, you're maybe like 11 and a half yards. So the angle is a little bit tighter, and you've got more chance of saving the ball. And I'm wondering if that's his technique for sort of making up for his lack of height and lack of reach, which is one of the things Ian Wright was so concerned about. It's just a tiny step forward just to close the gap.
Except that, as far as I understand, VAR was supposed to be used in this penalty shootout. So if they left early, it was supposed to be called back. That's at least what I saw from a couple of different pundits writing about. Oh, it will be interesting to see if it's used here, if they use it to call penalties back if a goalkeeper leaves too early.
But I'm saying it's so small and imperceptible. But he didn't in a way that...
I mean, not to a video assistant referee.
True, but that would have been weird for VAR, right? If suddenly you're calling back every penalty for a keeper coming off his line that no one else has really noticed.
I don't know. I mean, maybe. But I think it doesn't matter if it's weird. It matters that that's what the rules are there for, and that's why you have the technology. So, again, maybe this is another wrinkle pointing to they haven't quite figured out when to use it. And maybe they weren't even using it in the penalty shootout, and the pundits were just incorrect. So it just makes me wonder a little bit about, like, when is it being used and for what and why? And now my head hurts a little bit.
Well, maybe if they do start using it and really enforce it strictly that you can't leave your line at all until the ball is kicked, then Claudio Bravo's reign of terror will be over. But for now, he reigns for 3 summers straight.
He does indeed, as do Chile. And I want to say, we've talked about his saves. We should also mention the penalty takers for Chile who converted were Vidal, Aranguiz, and Sanchez.
Bang, bang, bang.
And, I mean, think about Vidal for a second. Going back to the Ronaldo conversation, I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but, like, I mean, Arturo Vidal, he is Alexis Sanchez gets the headlines. He's the one that most people would probably say. If I said name a Chilean player, they'd say Alexis Sanchez. If I said name a second Chilean player, right now maybe they'd say Claudio Bravo, but generally I think they'd go Arturo Vidal. But he is that engine. He is that, like, locomotive that drives the team. You could see him. There was one point where I think he said, like he was on the other side of the field. This is before penalties. Like, this was still during regulation. And I think he, like, won the ball off of somebody and it went out of bounds, and they got a throw in deep in Portugal's territory. And you could hear him, because the mic was right there, screaming like "Fuera!" and like trying to like amp up the crowd a little bit. Like, he's the one that leads that team.
On the same note, did you see him chest bumping everybody between penalty kicks?
Yeah.
Like, he took the first one, scored it, then chest bumped all his teammates when everybody else scored. Yeah.
And then he went out and took the first one and scored it and, like, amped up the crowd again and got everybody going. And I guess that's what I'm pointing to is, like, if you are going to be that leader of the team, then that's what you've got to be. And I feel like maybe I'm being too harsh, but that's kind of my feeling on that. Is like, you want your player who's going to instill the most confidence taking that first penalty. I don't know if that's Ricardo Quaresma for me, but I do think it's probably Arturo Vidal.
Yeah, fair enough.
I mean, I guess it's easy to say that when the way things went the way they did.
That's it, right? If this came down to a nail biting and everyone scored 4, and then you want your best guy to score the 5th, then it makes sense, right? It's always easy to say in hindsight.
Yeah, it's just so often that 5th penalty doesn't get taken. Like,
that's true.
It's just you're putting yourself in this position, and I'm sure every other hacky journalist is having this same argument.
All right, but statistically, I'm not very good with numbers, but I'm going to confidently say that statistically, the 5th penalty of the 5 is the least taken. It has to be, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you can't skip 1, so yeah.
Right. And if you only get to 3 or 4, yeah, okay.
Yeah. It's a bold declaration. I mean, I would argue that probably, like, the 10th penalty is the least taken.
Well, no, yeah, I'm saying of the 5.
Yeah. But yes, I guess you're probably right that yes, if you're talking about the first 5 penalty kick takers, 5 is probably statistically the least taken of the bunch.
I accept your apology.
There's no apology there. I don't think you can skip number 2 to get to number 3. So here we are. I did want to say though, so we both kind of had predictions about Portugal, like flick-ons and headed goals, and I have a theory about why that didn't really work so well for Portugal and therefore for us.
Why that is then?
I think it's because Portugal kind of had the same idea, like with the concept being that Cristiano Ronaldo is the focal point of the attack. He's the one you've got to pay attention to. And so it seemed to me like Fernando Santos had him moving wide a lot. So you would frequently see him getting the ball out on the channel and crossing the ball in. And my expectation, and it almost worked once, that was the one where Andre Silva hit it right at the goalkeeper.
Yeah, Ronaldo squared it, right? Ronaldo squared it on the run. It was a really good ball. Yeah.
It was indeed. But I think the idea was that they would focus so much on Ronaldo that somebody would go with him, and that would pull one defender out, and that would leave space for either an on-rushing Portuguese midfielder or for Andre Silva. But Chile, being Chile, were so disciplined that really what you ended up having was Ronaldo drifting wide, getting the ball, picking his head up, and then playing it back to the left back or the central midfielders.
Yeah.
So I think it kind of negated that whole approach, and that's why, again, Portugal didn't really look too threatening for most of the game.
And I'll go back to my original point in the preview, which is Chile just get the job done.
Yep, they sure do.
Yep, they're on to the final. Chile in the Confederations Cup final, their third final in a row, right? 2015, 2016, 2017. The game is on Sunday, I believe. We'll double-check that tomorrow. Their opponent is either Mexico or Germany. And here's me hoping that it's Mexico because I want to see a rematch of Mexico-Chile.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll have to wait and see. Come Thursday, I guess we'll have our answer.
So, yeah, the game is tomorrow, 2 p.m. Eastern on Fox Sports 2, Mexico v. Germany. I think we've got a specific prediction for each team. But do you have anything to say sort of overall about this matchup, Taylor, before we get into it?
Yes. First of all, I can confirm that whoever advances will be playing Chile on Sunday at 2 p.m.
Hey.
Kickoff. The second thing I'll say is I really didn't know what to make of Mexico. When I was trying to, I walked the dogs, like I said. It was a 40-minute walk. The entire time I was trying to think, what are they going to do? How are they going to do this? And I kind of ended up not feeling like I had any answers.
Same.
And I felt better because I listened to the Mexican Soccer Show, which is a very good podcast if you want to be informed.
Tom Moss is on there, right?
Occasionally. He was not this time, but yeah. But it's a very good English language show about the Mexican national team if you want to be informed of what's going on with El Tri. And they similarly were like, we have no idea. It could be basically it was a lot of I hope he doesn't do this, but he might do this. I hope they don't play this, but they might try that. And so I think that is kind of what you get with Juan Carlos Osorio. And to a certain extent, it reminds me of a much more successful, mind you, Jurgen Klinsmann, where going into U.S. games, major U.S. games, we would kind of have no idea. And we'd get games where we would think we knew exactly what would work, and he did that, and we'd be pumped. And then we had games where we were like, you can't do this because you'll get destroyed. And then he'd play Alejandro Bedoya as defensive midfielder in that game. So so it just feels a little bit like maybe you kind of never really know if the tinkering and the rotation is going to work. Although lately it seems like it's working for Mexico.
So here's my take on Juan Carlos Osorio. I agree that similar to Klinsmann, it's hard to predict what he's going to do, right? But I would say contra Klinsmann, Osorio does it with a plan. It's more like, you know the
Absolutely.
phrase horses for courses? You know what I mean? Like he sort of looks at the opposition and decides, okay, this is what we need to do against these guys. This is the best personnel to do that. This is the plan. Doesn't matter if it doesn't match last week's plan. This is the plan for this game. Whereas with Klinsmann, I felt like there wasn't that sort of level of preparation and planning. So that's why I'm not sure it's fair to draw that kind of parallel. Although you do end up with weirdly the same result, which is a head scratcher of a formation when it gets revealed.
Yeah, and I guess that's all I mean by it. First of all, no, I had not heard horses for courses, and I now love that, and we'll use it often. It's as Jeremy Jam would say, that's mine now. But yes, and that's what I mean. Is sort of it's tough to know. You could predict your starting 11 and be completely wrong or completely right, and for various reasons therein. So that makes it all the more captivating. And then you look at who he will and won't have. It seems like we know Andres Guardado is going to be suspended. It seems like Diego Reyes is going to miss this game as well due to injury. So and then he has been rotating the goalkeepers, but it seems like consensus is that people would prefer he start Guillermo Ochoa. So we'll see if that is what actually ends up happening. You
also have, I think Moreno had a slight injury concern, as well as Reyes. Salcedo's out, right, from early on, from that shoulder injury, but I'm not exactly sure what it was. And I read a story that Chicharito pulled out of training on Monday with muscle fatigue, which is basically he's run himself into the ground. So that's a huge concern as well, right? So between sort of Osorio constantly changing things around with trying to, horses for courses, trying to pick a team to fit the opposition, plus injuries and suspensions, it becomes really, really hard to predict his 11. One of the key questions I think is going to be Hector Herrera. I've seen a lot of talk about Hector Herrera on Twitter from Mexico fans. Is his role as the deep-lying midfielder. He's almost playing like the Michael Bradley role, the number 6. And a bit like Michael Bradley, there's a feeling that maybe he's not quite tough enough defensively. I remember the game against Russia. I was all over this on Twitter, tweeting away, Mexico, Russia. Hector Herrera played like the number 6 role, provided the assist with a deep, sort of a pass from deep for first goal, lost the ball in the number 6 spot for the equaliser, and then played another. So it was really just a long ball from the number 6 position for the Chucky Lozano equaliser. So it was really like another weird phrase, swings and roundabouts, like what you gain on the swings, you lose on the roundabouts type situation. And the consensus among Mexico fans seems to be that they like Herrera playing deep against weaker opposition, but they're worried about what happens against tough opposition. And even Germany's sort of experimental 23, that's tough opposition, right? So that'd be a big test if Herrera plays in that same role tomorrow.
And that's why I think I've heard a lot of people suggesting that maybe that's why he needs a partner, because there's concern about if it's Emre Can, that he could be overrun in midfield, that he'll need some support. And really, I mean, that German team, it might be a German B team or a B plus team, whatever you want to go with, or a B minus team, who knows? But it's still going to cause problems. It's still a German national team. And so I think, that's another question is like, do you go with the 4-3-3? Do you go with the back 3 and then give Herrera a little bit more support in the center of midfield? It will be interesting to see what exactly Juan Carlos Osorio does, especially because, as you mentioned, Chicharito has muscle fatigue. Mexico have had a lot of success when playing high press and with a lot of intensity. So you wonder if Chicharito has some muscle concerns, if he'll be ready to go and play that high intensity game.
The other guy I want to spotlight is Rafa Marquez. Because I'm thinking with all the injuries to defenders and maybe the question mark about Herrera at defensive midfield, maybe there's a role for Rafa Marquez to start this game, either as a centre-back in a back 3 or as the defensive midfielder or as Hector Herrera's defensive midfield partner.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. I don't know how much, I can't say with confidence how many minutes he's gotten this tournament. I don't think it's been as many as he would like, so it might be a bold decision to start him.
But maybe that's it, they're saving him for the big moment.
Sure. I mean, that's certainly a possibility, but again, that's the thing with Juan Carlos Osorio is it's always a gamble. But to play a guy who basically I think has only gotten like 20 minutes or so in this whole tournament, it would be interesting to bring him up and have him start against Germany.
All right, so shall we talk, before we get to specific predictions, let's talk about Germany sort of going into this game, because we haven't really talked much about this German team throughout this whole tournament. We mentioned that it's an experimental roster. It is a fascinating roster, right?
Yeah, I mean, because you basically don't have any of your A players there, or very few of your A players.
No Mesut Ozil, Thomas Muller, etc.
Then you've got your U21 squad who are playing at the Euros, so you don't have a lot. I'm not familiar.
I haven't watched them lately.
Oh, you haven't seen them?
No,
really?
Never heard of what they're doing.
Oh, okay. Because there was this penalty shootout. We talked about it yesterday. I guess you forgot. It's fine. No worries.
I've been too busy trying to get Claudio Bravo English citizenship.
You might have some problems there. Well, maybe not with the citizenship, but I think you might have trouble getting him on the national team. But yeah, so where do you want to go with this German team? What should we discuss? I think I just want to make the point that even though it is very much a B team, it's still chock full of talent. Guys like Timo Werner, Julian Draxler, Mustafi, Arsenal fans will attest. The guy I was really impressed with, I can't even remember where he plays his club football, but when I saw Rudy, the defensive midfielder, that looked like a guy who could play like very top-level international football. And then Hoffenheim, by the way.
Okay, there you go. And then Emre Can, you mentioned earlier, and Goretzka in midfield, I think also looks like a man ready to boss a midfield. And it was kind of a reminder that Germany are so deep that many of these players could be like absolute standout starters on many, many, many other international teams. So I'm saying don't take this German team lightly just because it seems like a B team.
Yeah, I mean, and then obviously going back to the whole Germany are pretty good at the soul soccer thing. I mean, you look at their goalkeeper. Yeah, you don't have Manuel Neuer there because I guess he's given the summer off. So instead, you just have the starting goalkeeper for Barcelona. Like, I mean, it's sort of which you do feel sort of bad for Ter Stegen because he really is coming of age at the wrong time to be a German goalkeeper.
It's right, isn't it? Any time Manuel Neuer's in playing age, the wrong time.
It will be interesting to see if Ter Stegen has a little piece of notepaper in his sock for the entire game, or if that just happens if and when they go to penalties.
I think it's a German tradition. Jens Lehmann just writes up the notes real fast and stuffs it in your sock. Some German goalkeepers don't even know it's in there until they just roll it down. They're like, oh, look what Jens left.
That's weird. That's a very weirdly specific form of like the tooth fairy.
Yeah.
The Jens fairy. He just shows up and shoves notes into your socks. So with that in mind, the Jens Lehmann in mind, shall we talk about maybe some specific predictions for this game?
Yeah, I invite you to go first with your Mexico prediction.
With my Mexico prediction, I will say that Mexico will concede in the first 35 minutes.
Ooh, why?
So if first of all, I'll say that this is not the most fun prediction because really after the first 35 minutes, you know if you've got it or not. But I will say that because that's kind of what they've been doing this tournament. Every single game, they've conceded in the first half. In their first game against New Zealand, it was the 42nd minute, but with each game, it's happened earlier and earlier. That's why I'm saying 35 as opposed to the first half. But I think because it's Germany, we know that they can concede goals as well early. But I think they'll be a little bit more ready for this game, and maybe you will have Mexico doing a little bit of rotation, a little bit of uncertainty early. You don't have Guardado, you don't have, as we said, Diego Reyes, maybe some other players.
Yeah. I mean, it's injuries and suspensions as much as anything. It's a weakened Mexico team.
And so I think you might see Mexico punished for that in the first, as I said, 35 minutes or so. That's not to say I don't think they'll fight back, because I think there will be goals in this game. They've both scored goals and conceded goals. Both teams have in this tournament. So I think this one is probably the more likely of the two to see some goals. He says, knowing that one goal makes that factually correct.
Okay, so my Mexico prediction is a little more positive than yours, but not entirely.
And don't worry, I've gone negative with both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, it's not the famous Taylor Rocco anti-Mexico bias, which doesn't exist. But
it does not.
My prediction is that when Mexico score, or if Mexico score, they will score a goal as a result of speed from their wingers. Like, even if it's like Raul Jimenez or Chicharito actually finishes it, it's one of their wingers. The speed, they will just outpace a German fullback or defender. Yep. So it's going to be Aquino or Chucky Lozano, it's going to be I'm one missing, Jürgen Damm. Could be Jürgen Damm, the German Mexican. I'm not counting Carlos Vela as a winger because he's not really, right? He's more of a forward who happens to play wide. But here's the other part of this prediction is I'm slightly worried that maybe Osorio will decide not to go with wingers to start with, and it may be sort of a late game, like, get him on, you know what I mean? Like, get Chucky Lozano on, see what he can do, get Aquino on, see what he can do. A bit of a late game gamble, but I still think there's the way that Germany sort of sometimes press, the way that their defenders get up the field, right? Even their centre-backs, their three centre-backs end up pulling wide and almost being right wingers and left wingers. There will be space in behind for one of those guys to just put their foot on the gas and get down the wing and maybe cut it back.
So then are you just predicting that, like, the goal will come from somebody playing the ball in from the channel, or is it specifically a winger?
It's specifically a winger, like not a specific winger, because you don't know which one he's going to play, but it's either going to be Lozano, Aquino, or Damm, and it'll be specifically like a major part of the goal will be their pace. They will just outpace someone.
Okay, gotcha.
Should we move on to Germany?
Let's do.
What do you see Germany doing? Yeah, please do.
So I feel like this could be a similar game to the Germany-Chile game, in which both teams scored, but it was Chile doing the kind of high pressure, Germany at times having success evading that pressure, but at times struggling to deal with it. And I think Mexico will come out, really try to put Germany on their heels and really go at them. Yeah. And I think with that, there are opportunities to make Germany pay. And that's why I'm going to say that Mustafi will get caught in possession on at least once. And if you want me to, I'll say, and that will result in a Chilean goal. But that's a very, very specific prediction. But I think
a Mexican goal?
Yes, excuse me. Sorry, not Chile.
Did it result in a Chilean goal? Was it Mustafi who played the ball out of the back and Sanchez scored in the 6th minute in the group game?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Played it out, and then he made the really bad tackle. But referee let play continue because they were going to score, and they did. Yeah. But it's also that in term, like, when Germany do get the ball in possession in the back four, back three, whatever they go with, Mustafi is the one who tends to be the most likely to bring that ball out of the back and go on a little bit of a dribble. And again, if you have got the Mexican pressure, I could see him just getting robbed of possession at the worst possible moment for Germany. Oh. So I think that is a moment you might see is Mustafi getting caught in possession.
So my prediction is all about Joshua Kimmich, or Joshua Kimmich, as I think is the correct pronunciation. He's either going to play right centre-back of the back three, right wing-back, or somewhere in central midfield, or striker or goalkeeper. But, most likely seems to be Kimmich as the right wing-back, and I think Hector as the left wing-back, who's been kind of impressive and attacking in his own right as well, right? But so many times I've seen Kimmich playing magnificent, unexpected through balls from that right-hand side. So I'm going to go with a Joshua Kimmich assist.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think he'll just play a sneaky ball in behind. You know what I'm talking about, right? You've seen those balls that he's been playing.
Absolutely.
And it'll be like Timo Werner or Stindl or Julian Draxler, running onto it. So yeah, a Kimmich assist is what I'm predicting.
I actually, speaking of pronouncing German names, I've just made my peace with the fact that I will never do it properly, because I was listening to Raphael Honigstein pronounce the name that you are currently trying to pronounce.
Yeah.
And even that, like, the last part of Kimmich is like, it's like this like KCH that I will just never be able to get. I think you have to be a native speaker or very, very good with accents to pick it up.
I think Kimmich is like Tuchel. You have to like half swallow it, you know what I mean?
Well, yeah, I guess we'll just have to keep working on that one. But I do think that maybe both of our predictions indicate what we expect will happen, is that it will be kind of at times chaotic and at times controlled, and there will be goals. So maybe even if it does go to extra time or penalties, maybe that's because it's 1-1 as opposed to 0-0.
Yeah, it'll be better than today.
Yeah, fair? Let's hope so.
Okay, yeah, so it's Fox Sports 2, 2 p.m. Eastern kickoff. We'll be back to review it after the game, maybe around the same-ish time as today. Looking ahead, we mentioned that there's the Confederations Cup final on Sunday. On Saturday, the US men's national team plays.
Yep.
So the US plays Ghana on Saturday in basically a pre-Gold Cup warm-up friendly. But Ghana are sending a pretty strong team. And I think, Taylor, unless my research leads me astray, they're also playing Mexico tonight. Which is weird, right? Because technically Mexico's first team is playing in the Gold Cup. So Mexico's first team is playing Ghana tonight. And Mexico's first team is also playing a Confederations Cup semi-final tomorrow. But it'll be Mexico's Gold Cup B squad, basically.
If you look at their schedule, it has like Ghana first and then Germany second. So for a minute, I was like, wait, what have I missed? Was I really not paying attention to this tournament? Because something seems to have happened.
But maybe it's worth keeping an eye on that just to see first who Mexico roll out, like what their Gold Cup team looks like. And also to get a look at Ghana to see what the US is up against. We'll preview that USA-Ghana game at a later date, but it's definitely a game worth keeping an eye on.
I like the inflection at the end when you weren't sure when we were going to preview it, so you went with date?
Yeah, well, it's somewhere between now and then.
Well said, Daryl Grove.
All right, Taylor Rockwell. Until tomorrow, thank you for taking the time to talk to me today.
Right back at you, buddy.
Listeners, thank you for listening, and we will be back after Germany-Mexico tomorrow.